Next up, we are going to do cool and warm grays. And I'm going to show you a really awesome tool for that. The reason, I guess I should first preface this by saying the reason I'm specifically showing you cool and warm grays is because it allows you a little bit more of a contextual basis to compose your image, right? Because the look and feel of a slate of cool grays versus a slate of warm grays is totally different, right? We already talked about lighting before, right? Where an incandescent light is going to produce a very different quality of light from a fluorescent light, right? So, you know, the composure of the scene in terms of that kind of materiality and colorization matters as well. So, basically, what I'm getting at here, let me jump back into my non-cropped image like this, okay? Essentially, what I want to show you here is kind of the quickest way to get a slate of warm and cool grays. And these are going to be purely warm and cool grays. It's not going to be like a purplish gray or anything like that, okay? So basically, when you're developing some, let me just kind of set up like another slate of swatches. So here I'm going to do 6 swatches on the bottom. In case you guys are curious, if you didn't know this, hold Shift and it'll snap onto the specific ruler line.
Back in the 80s.
Yeah, sorry. So anyway, basically, let's do a box again, and I want to show you, if you were to do this manually, what it's going to look like. If you're over here in color, what you're probably going to do is double-click on the color, and it's going to look like this, okay? And if you're looking at warm grays, for instance, right, the warm grays are going to be in the yellow, orange, red spectrum. The cool grays are obviously going to be in the blue spectrum of hue, sort of up here. So basically it has either a little bit of red or orange in it, or a little bit of blue or greenish in it, depending on, obviously, the palette and application. So back down to warm here, you basically would have to go down the exact line along here that you would want in order to get a particular range of how dark you want that particular hue of warm gray to be. However, if you look at where this specifically is, right, the RGB value is 204, 199, 192. But if I go almost exactly down below it, it's 185, 181, 175. And, theoretically, we could have shifted a little bit left or right on the spectrum, but what this is telling you is that the RGB values are not linearly proportional to the graph or range of colors that you see on the screen. That's important to note. So really what you would wind up doing is kind of eyeballing it, and you would pick one here, say OK, and then you would drop it down there, right? And then you would go to your layers, you would start a new one, and then you would go back into your color, and then you would kind of move down a little bit, go to this one, or maybe even slightly more. I do want to point out that this does help, this little preview here, if you want it to be a very, very slight increase in the darkness of the color, then you just step it up one level and then hit OK, and then you're going to have something that's slightly darker, and it's going to look something like that. Okay, that is very manual. It's not hyper accurate. It's not super efficient either. Okay, I want you to get that in your head, that doing this manually is not generally the best practice. So part of this class is to basically constantly question, how do I do this better? How do I do this faster? Well, let's go back to the original state here. Basically, what you would want to do is pick a color that's your base warm gray, right? Whatever your primary warm gray is going to be. Let's say it's this color right here. Actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to pick the one that's closest to a gray, a warm gray, on this list of my original colors. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper, click on that one. That's more tan than it is gray. But anyway, when I double click this, you'll see where it is, and then you can just kind of move left on the spectrum, maybe even a little bit up, and just lighten it up a little bit and make it more gray. Okay, so that's the closest thing to that particular warm gray that I can find. And then here's really the key. Color libraries is super, super awesome. So when you switch from the color picker to color libraries, it immediately brings you to the range of colors that's associated with your selection. That's pretty amazing, I think, anyway. So this puts you right smack in the middle. So you've got a warm gray 3C, and then you can just hit OK, and it selects that color, and you'll just put that in there. Go back in. You're going to pick this one. Oh, I need to do a new layer, I think. New layer, go back in, you pick that, hit OK. There you go. And then you just can keep going, basically. What you'll find is that the colors actually get pretty dark pretty fast, and usually your grays need to be pretty washed out. Yeah, but anyway, you could keep going along this path if you want, but I'm not going to go exhaustively down the whole thing. Okay, what I specifically want to communicate to you is that using these palettes is extremely powerful. Okay, so let me just kind of do another one real fast. If you double click into that, I'm going to go back to my warm gray 1C. Let's see, which other one did I want to do? True match. There you go. So true match is also really useful because it gives you more than just the 5 selections that were already there. So, but these are a little bit more tan than they are just warm gray. But you can slide. You can basically just click this, and it'll shift through the hues here a little bit. So these are cooler grays, and as you move up, it's going to get a little bit warmer to the point where it's actually a little dark. But you know, whether or not this is perfectly useful for you is sort of up to you to decide. It just depends on how you want to use it. This one's probably more useful for the cool grays, which you would. Oh, sorry. Box. Start here. Say OK. Like that. Okay, and then you would just kind of keep going through that list. New layer, picker, true match, okay, and then put the next one in. Darn it. There you go. All right, so there is, well, I should stop for a moment. Are there any questions on that right now?
So what was the top one's what?
The top one are the warm grays.
How do you differentiate? Like how do you figure out which one?
There's going to be more red tone in a warm gray, and the cool grays are going to be more blue tones. Right? See how this one? I mean, obviously it's almost like a dirt, tan color, and it feels warmer, like wood, or the ground. Cool grays are going to feel obviously cooler because it looks like metal or concrete, right? In the shade. Does that make sense?
So that's not really coming from the image then? That's just something.
That is not coming from the image. The reason that I'm showing you warm grays and cool grays is because you use them as contextual background for your actual object, right? So the architecture, as you're going to select it, is going to either be placed in a cool gray or a warm gray background based off of the image that it's supposed to be corresponding to, right? So the palette that you've selected. In many cases, like this image that I selected could really go both ways. If I take, well, let me just do one or two more actually, so that you can compare it properly. Go here. Do another one. All right, so I only did a small selection of these, but let me just merge these into one object, and then I'm going to free transform them. Right, so as I compare the color palettes here, you'll see that they're pretty compatible. Like, if I put the warm grays up next to it, at least for as long as I'm using most of the warmer end of my color palette spectrum to connect the architecture, and then the cooler palette is the more accentuated side, that's pretty fitting, right? But if I flip this around, the cool grays still relate to the project, but they're more associated with the cooler end of my color palette that I've selected. Does that make sense? And it's not perfect. In fact, if I'm going to use the cool grays, I probably want to use darker cool grays, because these are a little too light. Does that make sense? So, in reality, if I chose to do this one, I'd probably use the warm grays, and then I would just use like the darker blue and purple to specifically call out specialty items in my architecture. So anyway, what we're going to be doing with this is creating a palette down the bottom. And it doesn't matter to me whether or not you do 5 colors or if you do 12 colors down the bottom. I just want probably a minimum of 5 down there. And it's up to you to decide how wide of a range of these cool and dark grays you want. If you want it to be pretty light, then start off with the lightest possible gray that you can find. So go to your color picker and pick a very, very cool gray. Make sure that your color is set to blue, but pick something that almost looks like it's white, like it's imperceptibly blue. That way, when you switch over to color libraries, you're going to pick something that starts off at the lower range. You can also, let's see, well, this one probably wouldn't give you very many of those. Yeah, you can try out a few of these, but I think your Pantones are probably going to be the best. Pastel coated, that's going to give you too many colors. Uncoated. Process is going to have too much, yeah, you probably just want. Which one did it default to? I forget where it defaulted. Did it do process coated?
Solid coated as default. Oh, I can tell.
I think you're right. It was solid coated, wasn't it? I gotta find the palette it chose anyway. So you want it to be pretty darn gray when you do that. Go over to color libraries. Anyway, that's not really indicative.
Yeah, solid coated default.
Yeah. There's a little too much color in that. I kind of really like the true match a little bit better for this, but you know, it's up to you. So I want you to explore that tool, pick a particular palette that you want to use as your contextual, you know, tie-in, and get it paired up with your image. Okay, so I'm going to finish off this one by completing my range of colors there. What questions do you have?
How do you add white background?
I just Control Z to before, or Control Alt Z, just step backwards to the point before I cropped it. Otherwise, if you already cropped it, saved it, closed it, and reopened it, you can't go backwards. So my suggestion would be just start a new file and then copy your original image over. Just grab it like this, copy, Control C. Yep, couldn't copy because it's empty. There you go.
And you want it on the bottom like that?
Copy merged, and then you could just paste it like that and then start working. What's that?
And you want it on the bottom? Great.
On this one, you sort of have a little bit more license because it's really purely contextual. I don't really mind where you put it, but I do want it to be adjacent to the image somewhere. I really just want you to be looking at it and thinking about this as a relationship to an image composition. Okay, what works, what doesn't work. Don't spend too much time on it though, because it doesn't have to be perfect. Any other questions? All right, so that's the last element.